Hi, this is Masabir Ali.
Can't take your call right now.
So this is the best that we got. This individual approached me in the shop. I didn't know he was approaching me, but he did approach me in the shop. And I didn't go to the shop expecting him to approach me. And he requested help. And this individual requested help from me to stop Tower Hamlets community housing merging with the crooks of Harka. Now, why did he approach me? I told him I'd call him after 5 o'clock. And I have been calling him since 5 o'clock. And he's not been able to answer the call. No wonder that as a Tower Hamlets community housing tenant, he is doomed. This is not how the Khoodeelaar campaign does campaign. So we'll put that as a note for the time being, which is now 21:37 hours GMT. And this is part B of the Khoodeelaar television channel, broadcast scheduled at 21:40 GMT. So we are broadcasting a few minutes earlier. Now I've got the Communist Party's morning scar of Tuesday, 25th of July, and on page 3 of the morning scar, there is this stupid heading. Under politics, leadership chaos delaying probe on Islamophobia. Now, what is Islamophobia? What they are saying is they are contradicting. If they call it Islamophobia and then use the very offensive anti-Muslim term themselves, then they are being anti-Muslim as the supposed others who are supposedly attacking Muslims. Now, let me explain this again for the 100th time. Phobia, this Islamophobia, the word is a conjunction. Well, let's get this absolutely linguistically correct. So let's say phobia. What is phobia? Phobia is described here on the internet as an extreme or irrational fear of or aversion to something. She suffered from a phobia about birds. And there are then several different categories. What are the three types of phobias? What does having a phobia mean? Is phobia mental illness? Now, we're not going into the individual ones. So, the phobia means an aversion, a dislike, extreme, irrational, etc., etc. Now, there are several entries about Islamophobia, including the first one that comes up is from Muslim Council of Britain, And another one comes up which is not spelled out the actual website, but it's incoils.or.ld. That one is headed An Analysis of Conjunction in the Muslim News. And then the other one next to that is Strategies to Overcome Islamophobia and Christianophobia. And then the next one from Sage Publications, journals.sagepub.com. It is headed Characterizing Australians who have high levels of anger. And then under the entry on Wikipedia, Islamophobia is stated as follows. Now, the first line reads, this article is about fear, hatred of, or prejudice towards Muslims or Islam. For religious persecution of Muslims, see persecution of Muslims. For the criticism of Islam, see criticism of Islam, not to be confused with anti-Middle Eastern sentiment. Part of a series on Islamophobia. And there is a whole range of issues, part of a series on Isra, etc. Now, essentially, none of these entries or items that I have read so far in headline form satisfied the criteria that I have set, which is as follows. That phobia is, let's say. So if you add two of these words, Islam plus fear, which is what produces the result, Islamophobia, then what you are saying is that it is fear of Islam. It doesn't go into the details of irrational or psychological, whatever. It is fear of Islam. And the next nearest, contextually, the nearest meaning in social terms, interactively, is hatred. Fear, hatred, intolerance. So if we add together all these different elements, then we find that Islamophobia itself is a word that shows hatred of Islam, irrational of Islam, intolerance of Islam, opposition to Islam, hostility to Islam. So Islamophobia then means that Islam is supposed to be the source of the fear, the base of the fear. That there is something inherent in the word of Islam that produces, in other words, justifies, gives excuses to the haters who hate Islam. So far, Islamophobia is negative, even when it is supposedly explained in detail that those who are Islamophobic are themselves at fault. But that actually leaves out the main origin. The origin is the acceptance of the basis, some basis, whatever it is, that Islam by itself is something to be feared. So, anyone who says that they are against Islamophobia are also saying that they accept that Islam has something to justify its existence by. That Islam 100% acceptable. That is why Islamophobia equates, is equal to being in agreement with those who oppose Islam, oppose adherents of Islam, and are Islam. So the most appropriate and least controversial, least offensive, least anti-Islamic, anti-Muslim would be the conjunction anti-Muslim or anti-Islamic. So those who say that they are against Islamophobia should use anti-Muslim or anti-Islam. I hope I have explained this again, but it will be continued. So the Communist Morning Star is saying that because of the alleged leadership chaos, the investigation into anti-Muslim activities in the United Kingdom is being delayed, which is on page 3. I have rephrased it. Instead of saying what they have said, I have rephrased it and paraphrased it. The Tories have failed to tackle Islamophobia. What they should be saying there is the Tories have refused to deal with and oppose anti-Muslim hatred. Within the Conservative Party, due to leadership chaos, an independent review has found out leadership chaos. There is no leadership chaos at all. Because what you have in the UK Conservative Party at the present time is dedicated anti Muslim leadership. It's not a chaos, it's a dedicated anti Muslim leadership that actually derives its inspiration and the agenda from the traditional crusader anti Muslim hostility going back hundreds of years. And the fact that the Ibila, Cruella, Suella Fernandez of Goan origin is the UK's interior minister, driving the most extreme pro Nazi narrative against asylum seekers and refugees, is not unconnected with the fact that she is a dedicated opponent, a crusader against Muslims. And it is equally applicable to Rishi Sunak. So therefore, the party is actively anti-Muslim. And why in the context of the political infrastructure and logistics, this is a product, partly a result of the anti-Muslim position and ideology on the part of the political murderer of the Labour Party, which is Keir Starmer. Starmer is an anti-Muslim, racist, and so therefore the conservatives, the anti-Muslim conservatives, are quite confident that they can allow anti-Muslim hostility, hatred to continue and fester in the conservative party. And they will not be upset by any procedural move, let alone a demand by the anti-Muslim leadership of Keir Starmer of the Labour Party. So the Morning Star is wrong, as is usual. The Morning Star is the product of the so-called Communist Party of Great Britain, but it's completely dishonest and dishonestly produced. It's corrupt and it's a state truth, which is why I have renamed it Morning Scar, not Star. So I got hold of this copy for the first time, the print copy, for the first time about 4 years, I think. 4 years meaning almost just 2 or 3 months into the pandemic. So it's about 4 years since I last had any kind of access to the outlets where I could buy the print scar. So we go back to the continuation of the item that we did. This is the front page of the Morning Star of Tuesday, which is about Keir Starmer, the political murderer. They don't call him political murderer, but that is they're calling him Arise Sir U-turn. I mean, for an outfit that calls itself communist, what a timid fucking stupid language that is. So we go back to the Times and the other papers of Tuesday. And the Times on the front page has got this. On page 45, there is an obituary on George Alagate. And I was saying that in part A, I did say that when he surfaced at age 26, surfaced as a part of the so-called East End News during the beginning of 1981 at an address in Tower Hamlets where the 3 or 4 then active kind of internal feudists of the National Union of Journalists were falsely claiming to be producing the alternative to the then local paper, the East London Idiotizer. The Idiotizer is a renaming by me based on the behavior, the conduct of the East London Advertiser, because it idiotizes. So I created a new verb, transitive. That instead of educating and informing and giving the enlightenment or fact to the readership, so called, it gives them idiocies and makes them idiots, which is what it did in July 1989. Because we had this demonstration. Remember the sit down demonstration? It turned out to be near the junction of Wilmore Street and Bethnal Road on the 15th of July 1989, as part of the protest against the racist murder of Mr. Ismat Ali and his close relation, Watir Ali, and the police's refusal to do anything to find the killers and murderers. So, when this was covered, that is to say, allegedly reported by the East London Idiotizer, they included about 3 pictures of me leading the sit down campaign, but they also included the picture of a child. I didn't see that child in the demonstration. And I still don't know where they found that child. Why? Because they found a child who looks like a Bangladeshi or an Asian child, a boy, carrying a toy gun. Remember, that was July 1989. July 1989 was more than a decade before Tony Blair and George W. Bush mounted their genocidist war against the Iranians, well, against the Afghanis and the Iraqis. They had already been at war against the Iranians anyway, and which is continuing. So, where did they find that boy? Now, look at the sophistication, the really deep conspiracy and thinking that went on into production of that picture of a boy with a fake gun. What were they suggesting? They were suggesting as early as July 1989 that Asian children in the east end of London were being armed to fight who? They were being armed to fight the whites. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's not my opinion. What has happened in the years since 89, 99, 2009, 2019, and now 2023? There has been no anti racist physical. There has been no anti racist physical confrontation initiated by any Asian young people or old people in all that time since the murders, still unsolved murders of Mr. Ismat Ali and his close relation Mr. Watir Ali in on the Sunday, the 9th of July, 1989. So think about, on the one hand, the refrain is that the print newspaper losing the market because of the internet and all the rest of it. But essentially, whatever the lack of business and commerce, the mental racist conspiracy and hostility on the part of those who are responsible for producing these papers has been as vigorous, as virulent, and as hateful than as it had been for hundreds of years. And so, when you look at the composition of the Tower Hamlets Council since that time, various times 89, 89, 99, 2009, 19, 20, 30, 4 years on, none of the elected councillors at Tower Hamlets Council, which is the local council, has even shown that they noticed that picture of the presumably the Bangladeshi child carrying a toy gun, and they put that picture near the pictures of us sitting in the middle of the Bethnal Green Road, as if that boy was with us. He wasn't. I never saw that boy until I saw it in the picture in the East London idiotizer. Now that was 1989, July 1989. Now the name from the East London idiotizer that spread into Fleet Street wasn't anywhere there. So that was 89, 99, 10 years. And then if we add another 6 years, it's 16 years. 16 years after the Ismat Ali murder, I received a direct email request from an individual introducing himself to me as Ted Jury and requesting that I was doing against the Crossrail hole. Ted Jury. Now, of course, Ted Jury got quite a few number of the items about the campaign on, but then he degenerated, as he was bound to do. He degenerated and he became completely as idiotic as the others on the Islamic idiotizer. And even at the stage where Ted Jury was calling it idiotizer himself, He forgot. He lost his brains. Now, Ted Jury is the one who recognized, or at least claimed to have recognized, the power of the Khoodeelaar campaign, because he produced the first of his blog, Trial by Jury. It's a pun on the trial by Jury, and his name is spelled Jeory. So it was a pun on that one. But it didn't remain anything as rigorous as he was pretending it would be. But in that inaugural post, he did recognize the Khoodeelaar campaign and its power and its impact. And it favorably mentioned this campaign as against the elected councillors and other politicals. But whatever the reason, Ted Jury then degenerated to a point where he is now traceless. Of course, he has made since then he has made other quote relations. But the relations that he has made, I'm not naming or even describing the relations, are not based on ethics or morality, let alone transparency, fairness, etc., etc. The Ted Jury has disappeared, sunk out of existence as far as the events in Tyrannus is concerned, and whatever he said, whatever he published about the, in effect, corruption of Lutfur Rahman's regime has ceased being published anymore. Which is why the fact that Lutfur Rahman is now able to admit he is shameless, he is embarrassed, but he is not embarrassed at all, he is not shameless at all. He is cognitively challenged because Lutfur Rahman doesn't know what he is talking about. He doesn't understand the meaning of words that are put into his mouth by his racist masters, or more likely mistress or mistresses. We know the identity of his racist master and mistresses. We're not naming them. We're not naming those because it would be diminishing our status and standing, ethical standing and status, to even name them. But we know who they are. So what we are looking at now is going back to the Eastern Idiotizer and then back to the East End News. The East End News was being promoted by the NUJ left-wing racists who pretended to be setting up the East End News as an opposition for the people of the East End to the East London Idiotizer. But they failed because the racists involved in the East End News project were clueless themselves. They didn't know the people of East London, even though one of them, Mike Jamshid, had a home in Wapping at the time. But Jamshid was alien to the people and community in the East End of London as the other racists that arrived in the East End under the guises of NUJ left-wingers, like Jake the racist Eccleston. The racist Eccleston was as brazen and as ignorant and as stupid as Mike Jamshid, as Zelda Curtis. Now, Zelda Curtis was the nightmare woman from the CPGB, Communist Party. And she actually provided a kind of central nasty figure that could be found in the James Bond account from Russia with Love. That particular woman that played the role of trying to murder the James Bond character with her poisoned shoes. That is the role that Zelda Curtis played, and she almost looked like that actress. So, when the 26-year-old George Alagate arrived at the Eastern News, he was completely speechless, voiceless, had no opinion whatsoever. And today, even Jeremy Bowen, one of the BBC senior employees, is mentioning George Alagate as a source of moral inspiration. Every single type of the Fleet Street scumbag is coming up praising George Alagate. Now, none of them, during Alagate's 30 years, allegedly with the BBC, not a single one, none of these people ever mentioned George Alagate as a source of inspiration, intellectual, genius, and all the other things that they are calling him. And they were right not to mention any of that while he was alive because he wasn't the huge character they're painting him to be. As a 26-year-old, you would think that he would have lots and lots of challenging things to face and present and comment on, but he didn't. As I say, the East End News of the Eastern News venture was the criminals' conspiracy to find a mental slave to counter me. And they found a mental slave that was prepared to run a page of diversity. And this was not a journalist, this was not a campaigner, this was nothing to do with intellectually challenging the racists or imperialists or crooks, whatever. I mean, none of these morons had anything to begin to compare with my background and my actual involvements. I had been writing, publishing in English and in Bangladeshi, well, Bangladeshi now, but that was from the beginning of the 1960s, for fuck's sake. How can they compete with me? So, what they did was they were desperate in frustration because they couldn't argue with me at the so called policy sittings. So, they created a newspaper of London from Easters. And as a counter to me, now another bunch of racists doing their racism from Hackney have done the same thing. I mean, they have shut down one similar, I mean, outfit called East End, whatever. I'll check that one because the number of comments that I was sending and the number of comments that I was sending and getting published by them, the number was so huge that they didn't know what to do because they surveyed all the races available in East London, in Tower Hamlets, and not a single one was coming forward with their actual name to challenge anything I was saying. So these morons in Hackney decided that the best way would be to shut down that platform, which they did. Instead of letting me publish my comments against their idiocies, they shut down that outfit. And I'm going to check that in a minute and then I'll continue the update on that one. Remember, this is the Qur'aan campaign, broadcasting only on the internet under the banner of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions. And this one is timed at 21:40 GMT, which is 22:40 hours UK time on Tuesday, the 25th of July 2023. I'm going to check on this one. So these are the morons that are running this thing called Hackney Citizen. And these creeps extended the thing about Tower Hamlet Citizen or Eastern Citizen. But when they found that the only advocate for the rights of the people of the Eastern and for the rights of the tellers of the truth about Tower Hamlets was me, these fuckers ran away and they shut down their fucking operation for Tower Hamlets. Fuck them, the racists. So, how many creeps shall I count in all of Little England that haven't got the moral courage to answer the question and take on the challenge? What happened in the struggle for the right of the parent governors and the parents at the then Stratford School in 1992 that I was mobilizing was that the racists at the Guardian and Observer couldn't decide how to defame me and how to discredit my campaign. How could it doing something as absolutely 100% solid as I have been doing everything 100% solid? So what did they do? They went around and they looked for elements in the community that would go on the record and say something that would discredit my campaign. That is what the Guardian and the Observer, Alan Rabishar, was it Alan Rabishar or was it the other one, the poisonous one, Peter Preston? Peter Preston, was it there? I'll check the actual kind of sequence and the period when the editorship was changed. Whoever was in charge, they couldn't find anyone. So what they did, they approached Peter Newsom, white, Ken Livingston Livingston, white man, Daphne Gould, a most completely corrupt and useless head teacher of the Marlbury School, which I saved from being consumed, taken over by a mixed sex adventure by the Inner London Education Authority and the collusion of the local Town Council, which had just been taken over by the SDP Lib Dems. Daphne Gould, Peter Newsom, Ken Livingston Livingston, and Eric Bolton. These are, Eric Bolton was a HMI inspector, for fuck's sake. These are parasites that had no foundation in any part of the population whatsoever. They were holders of posts simply because of their being white. It doesn't matter whether they're fit or unfit. And here it was I on the ground defending real people, real parents that are embattled against the racist and smelling who was trying to obstruct them from having their say as parent governors. And the Guardian piece, it is worse than the stupid. But if you add up the quotations against me, what do you find? You don't find anything that usually characterizes the British political activist or political personality or campaign. I was not after a career. I was not after any money. I was not after anything personal. I was pure, ethical, moral, principled campaigner. That's what they found. And they added up, and the headline to the piece was they couldn't find any other headline, couldn't they? They had to make me a messiah. They said the angry messiah of E1. Can you believe that? After all their efforts, the Guardian and the Observer, they couldn't find anything to damn me with. So they had to raise me to the level of a messiah. But if you look at the heading, Angry Messiah of E1, and then read the actual contents, you find absolute masses and masses of conflicts and contradictions. It starts by saying something stupid about my coming from Silot. Of course, I come from Silot, but the fucking cunts have no idea how I came from Silot to the United Kingdom. I never came as an immigrant, as a migrant. Shits. I wanted to leave a corrupt atmosphere that had prevailed in the country. And there was no opposition. And there is no reference to my work there. I am the one that opposed all the existing intellectuals and establishment, the fuckers. They don't have the courage to mention that. I am the one who opposed and demolished all the criminals there. And it's not my word. When I questioned a conference of university vice chancellors and college principals, instead of being able to answer my question, they invited me to become a speaker on the platform. And based on my speech on the platform on that occasion, in January 1970, the then Pakistan National Television News led the main evening news with me. So, does the fucking Guardian have any clue as to how the height of my action has been, how consistent? And they try to reduce me to somebody coming from a village. Fuck them. Of course, I was born in a village, but I don't come from a village, you shits. I am the descendant of the saint Vedh Shah. Do they have any idea who Vedh Shah was? And I come from a background that they would not be able to even work out just the magnitude of the heritage that I represent and I have been representing. So that's what they did in the Guardian and Observer. The other thing they did was to manufacture a picture of me standing along with some pygmies. But what they did, as a photographer, I've been a photographer for longer than Alan Rabishar has been a journalist. What they did was to arrange, configure the picture, frame it in a way that makes me come across as about 5 or 6 inches shorter than the people who are actually 5 or 6 inches shorter than me. I mean, why did they want to do that? What was the purpose of trying to show me as shorter than the people who are actually shorter than me? So you've got about 5 or 6 different angles from which the Guardian and the Observer try to kind of discredit me. And today they say that they are the pioneers of the confession to slave routes. They say that they are pioneers of publishing the evidence of Amelia Gentleman's investigation about the Windrush. Fuck them, the fucking racist liars. They have no idea. They have absolutely no idea just the depth and the height of the resources and the heritage and the action that I represent and have been representing. So they put this allegate almost as if they've invented him today or in the last 2 days. He didn't exist. Can anyone watching George Alagia reading the BBC News over the so-called whatever number of years that he was presenting the news, can anyone remember what did he break? What breaking news presentation did he achieve? And this shitbag Clive Myrie, apparently he was in tears. I mean, whatever for? He was in tears not because he was in tears genuinely, but he was part of the orchestration of the parade that the BBC wanted to stage to replace, to kind of compensate for the Hugh Edwards embarrassment. So Naga Malchetti breaks down in tears. Safir Edward breaks down in tears. Clive Myrie breaks down in tears. For fuck's sake, these people are not telling the truth, and they claim that the BBC has been founded by John Reith, to tell the truth. It wasn't. John Reith was a supporter of Nazis. And there was a whole ongoing campaign while John Reith was in charge of the founding BBC years. There was a conflict between him and Churchill and other people about the extent to which they would appease the Nazis, appease the Hitler nationalists. And that was before the Nazis actually committed the genocide. So what we are looking at now, on the Times today in the front page, this is the Times. When I say today is Tuesday, I'm not talking about Wednesday time. There is this picture, and the caption of the Times says, "High Novice Charlotte Owen, 30, became the youngest peer when she took her seat in the House of Peers." I'm changing that word from the other word they've used and I don't use on principle, on ethical and moral ground. There is no human being who can be called a lord. As Baroness Owen of elderly age, she was nominated by Boris Johnson after serving as a special advisor to him at number 10. That is a lie. Charlotte Owen has not served as an advisor. She has not served as anything that can be identified publicly with honor and integrity. She was, by all accounts of sources that have actually come on the media, when they, at the height of the objections to Charlotte Owen being nominated at age 29 or 28, they have said that she was there mainly as a decoration, mainly has nothing to do with advising, nothing to do with advising Johnson. That is what they've said. Now let's check if we can find any traceable, mentionable evidence, accessible evidence of the comments that have been made about Charlotte Owen. Okay, in the Independent on the online, which has got 10 hours ago, this piece, who is Charlotte Owen and why did she get a peerage? And they're saying Charlotte Owen has entered the House of Peers for the first time today, weeks after becoming the youngest ever peer at age 30. A former aide to Boris Johnson, Owen was included in his controversial resignation honors list. A former aide to Boris Johnson, Owen was included in his controversial resignation honors list in June, joining fellow Tories Sean Bailey and Ben Hewsham. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that's the nearest I can come to the phonetic pronunciation, in being elevated to the House of Peers by the ex Prime Minister. By Johnson's full honors list was no, Mr. Johnson's full honors list was published shortly before he resigned on Friday, the 9th of June, and sparked a political row with Rishi Sunak after MPs Nadine Dorries and Nigel Adams were omitted. A parliamentary hairdresser, Michael Fabricant, MP, and former Home Secretary Priti Patel were among some of the other allies of Mr. Johnson handed gongs. Miss Owen will now become Baroness Owen. Here we take a look at who she is and how she earned the honor. Now, I don't know whether they're going to tell the truth, but let's have a look. Charlotte Catherine Tranta was born in 1993. Well, that was the year when racists murdered Steve Lawrence. Attended the University of York, graduating with a 2-1 in politics and international relations in 2015. ITB reports. They're being so careful. She worked as an intern at Portland, a strategic communications consultancy, before going on to work as a constituency man intern for the Tory MP William Ragg for 1 month. Ms. Owen then worked as a parliamentary intern to Mr. Johnson for 6 months. After that, she became parliamentary assistant, Mr. Alok Sharma, holding the position for 7 months. For a year and 9 months after this, she was a senior parliamentary assistant to Jake Berry and Mr. Johnson, before exclusively working for the former Prime Minister for a year and 2 months. From February 2021 to October 2022, Ms. Owen was a special advisor to both Mr. Johnson and Liz Truss during her short tenure as Prime Minister, that is, Liz Truss. Ms. Owen also reportedly worked for Liz Truss and the number 10 policy unit. She's had a few jobs in Parliament. Sky News, Liz Bates said. One of those was working for Boris Johnson. She did in the end work for the number 10 policy unit. And I think at the end of her political career, she was working for Liz Truss and the chief whip at the time. Not an illustrious political career by any stretch, but she will go to the House of Lords as well. Mr. Johnson also gave, that is a quotation. So I'm not using the word Lords, it's a House of Peers, as I would call it, if I were not using the quoted words. Mr. Johnson also gave awards to a number of aides who were embroiled in the Partygate scandal. He was accused of sickening insult to the bereaved after handing out gongs to allies caught up in the affair, including one dubbed Party Marty. Martin Reynolds is the one that is being referred to as Party Marty. His former principal private secretary, who boasted, we seem to have got away with it. The Bring Your Own Booze Garden Party during coronavirus restrictions has been nominated for a peerage. There were also honors for Dan Rosenfeld, he, that is Johnson, ex chief of staff, and Jack Doyle, that is Johnson's former director of communications, both of whom were in office during some of the rule breaking by Johnson. Former number 10 head of operations, Shelley Williams Walker, allegedly nicknamed DJ SWW after playing tunes from a laptop during a number 10 party on the eve of Prince Philip's funeral, was given a damehood. And there was a peerage for one time London mayoral contender, Sean Bailey, who was photographed at an apparent lockdown Christmas party at Conservative Party headquarters in 2020. Labour said it was a sickening insult that those who planned COVID parties and held boozy lockdown bashes while families were unable to mourn loved ones are now said to be handed gongs by Rishi Sunak. The row over Miss Doris and Mr. Adams, who also both resigned last week, not being included in the list for peerages rumbles on. Mr. Johnson accused Mr. Sunak of talking rubbish after the Prime Minister, that is Rishi Sunak, claimed he had asked him to do something I was not prepared to do. That is, he, meaning Boris Johnson, asked Rishi Sunak to do something that I, which is Rishi Sunak, was not prepared to do. This article was amended at 1440 on 19 June. A previous version said Jacob Rees-Mogg and Andrea Jenkins. Well, it's a Andrea Jenkins. Should be actually Andrea Jenkins, but the Independent Online has got the spelling wrong. Had been elevated to the House of Lords in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. They were in fact given a Knight's Bachelor, Knighthood, and Dame's Commander of the Order of the British Empire, respectively. Now, we have to check whether Sean Bailey is also there now in the House of Peers. Now, let's check because that appears to have been left incomplete by the I newspaper. Let's see whether he is also, like Charlotte Owens, in there. Well, he is in the House of Peers now, isn't he? Sean Sheriff Bailey, Baron Bailey of Paddington. Can you believe it? is a British politician and former journalist. A member of the Conservative Party, Bailey has been a member of the London Assembly since 2016 and the House of Peers since 2023. So how did they allow? How did, if, as the eyepiece says, Labour were critical, how did they allow Sean Bailey to be put in the House of Peers eventually? Why did they stop protesting? Now, this is one of the questions that I shall be wanting answers to. So we shall be taking a short look at the latest embarrassment that has been admitted for the first time by Lutfur Rahman. And we are saying this because this is an introduction to Lutfur Rahman admitting that he is ashamed. What is this? So there is this thing dated the 23rd of June, and this is the piece on an outlet called My London. And we shall go to that piece by Ruby Gregory, and it's 1740 hours UK time on the 23rd of June 2023. And it is a completely dishonest piece. It's headed East London Mayor embarrassed that there are no female councillors in his administration. Now, what Ruby Gregory is committing is a complete obscene pack of lying operation. Because what the piece doesn't mention, it doesn't mention the fact that Luther was condemned by the electoral commissioner of being, let's see what he said because I don't want to state an inaccurate part of the statement by Richard Morey. So this piece is about that ruling, and that is when Ted jury is still there, and it's dated the 23rd of April 2015. And he starts by saying, Ted jury that is, I'll write later on today's verdict, but I thought it would be useful to provide Richard Morey's ruling in full as a separate document. But nothing can replicate the tone with which he read his executive summary this morning. So he said, the full ruling is here. Richard Morey gives his ruling on Tower Hamlets election court. And Ted Jury says, I particularly like paragraphs 201 and 421. Let's see why he likes those. In short, Lutfur Rahman lost on 7 of 9 counts. He has been removed from office and is barred from standing in the rerun for mayor, which is likely on June 11th. He faces costs of at least £250,000. His agent, Councillor Alibor Chaudhry, is also been removed. His agent, Councillor Alibor Chaudhry, has also been removed from office. Now that is an error by Ted jury. It's not as also been removed from office. It's has also been removed from office. Councillor Olu Rahman is now acting mayor and must choose a deputy. The remaining Tower Hamlets first councillors remain in office. Mr. Mori said their elections had also been corrupt, but they weren't named in the petition, so they can't be removed. The council's legal chief told me that would now be a matter for the police should they want to take a case up. Now, up to this point, neither anybody in the council or anybody who in any way had claimed to be against corruption in the council, nor Ted Jury himself, has followed up any of these things during the last, what, 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 8 calendar years. Can you believe that? And he's saying in that introduction, which is just the introduction, he's not publishing the main comment or contents of the ruling. Lutfur's only appeal route is a judicial review, but the ruling was extremely damning. A judicial review could not in itself prevent a new election. More later. Now, as I have said, Lutfur filed at least 6 or 7 separate applications after the 23rd April 2015 ruling by Richard Morey. And all the appeals and challenges by Lutfur Rahman against what Richard Morey ruled were rejected, cancelled, rejected, and refused. Now, what remains outstanding at this time is that Lutfur Rahman has been condemned by the auditors, the accountancy firm that the then community secretary, Eric the Pickles, appointed PwC. And according to the report, although it was limited, inadequate, in many ways it was inadequate, even the PwC's inadequate report against the illegalities carried out by Lutfur Rahman in making financial decisions about property, especially as highlighted by his behavior over the what used to be called the old Poplar Town Hall and other substantial properties that belong to Tar Hamlets Council, that is the public, the people of Tar Hamlets. These are not, these have not been dealt with, and they should have been dealt with. And if they haven't been dealt with, then Ted Jory, who was breaking that story, should have been asking the questions, but he hasn't been. Now, going back to the Ruby Gregory piece about Lutfur Rahman saying that he is embarrassed and ashamed that his administration now doesn't have one single woman as a counselor. Now, if there is any shame to be acknowledged by Lutfur Rahman, and a shame that should have been acknowledged by Lutfur Rahman years ago, is the shame that he should be condemned to, and he has behaved shamefully, dishonestly, disgracefully in allowing Tower Hamlets Council to neglect its safeguarding the children duties as owed to those girls, schoolgirls. Our campaign has been the only one that has been pointing out this fact. And just to make sure that there is no discrepancy in our continuity and consistency, let's check what Tower Hamlets Council is prepared to say now about these girls. Now, I've entered the search term, just the search term, Shamima, and I did that at 22:50 GMT on Tuesday, the 25th of July 2023, and there is the result. Your search for, within quotes, I didn't use the quote, Shamima returned 0 results. So 1 month and 2 days since Ruby Gregory gave the propaganda to Lutfur Rahman saying that he was ashamed and embarrassed because allegedly there was no counselor belonging to his so-called party on Tar Hamlets Council. It was a woman. There is still no recognition of the real, truthfully shameful, disgraceful, embarrassing, illegal, corrupt behavior by Lutfur Rahman in blanking, in denying the very existence of Shamima Begum. We shall be continuing to raise these matters and questions, and this is coming to an end at 1 hour 15 minutes at 22:52 hours GMT on Tuesday, 25th of July 2023.